MP Charlie Angus. Ontario MPP Jagmeet Singh has also joined the race. Former Veterans Ombudsman Pat Strogren recently dropped out of the running. The new leader will be selected in October. Let's listen in.
Will take place largely in English with one French question. It's our intention that candidates answer each question in the language in which it's posed, but that's the choice of the candidate. Once again, I just remind the audience to please hold your applause until the end. So let's get right to it. Please welcome our candidates, Charlie Angus, Jagmeet Singh, Peter Julian, Nikki Ashton, and Guy Caron. Good luck to all the candidates. We'll begin with an opening statement of 90 seconds for each candidate. We're going to start with Nikki Ashton. Please begin.
Today we are in Mi'kmaq and Beothuk territory, and I acknowledge the Inuit and Innu territory of Labrador. People across Canada are recognizing we are facing growing inequality and the threat of climate change. Here in Newfoundland and Labrador, you see it through a shrinking economy, 12% unemployment, and brutal provincial austerity. There are two Canadas. Le Canada du 1%.
The Canada of the 1% with their unprecedented fortune, and the rest of us.
Communities are being hollowed out by job-killing neoliberal policies. The millennial generation, my generation, is facing a future that may be worse than previous generations. We need to take back our country from the rich and powerful with bold action.
One of the major priorities must be a plan for a drug plan.
In purchasing drugs. Compare this to the Trudeau Liberals' priority, a massive $13 billion increase in military spending, an aggressive shift to hard diplomacy, a code word for more wars. My message to Trudeau is, this is not our Canada. Let's invest in saving lives through pharmacare. Let's bring justice to our veterans. And let's not risk lives through increasing militarization. From Bernie Sanders to British Labour, people around the world are witnessing the power of progressive movements. It's our turn here in Canada to build a movement for social, environmental, and economic justice.
Thank you. We'll have Peter Julian, please.
I've worked here in Atlantic Canada, and I've had thousands of conversations with folks from Labrador City to St. John's and from northern New Brunswick to southern Nova Scotia. Rebuilding our movement nationally means rebuilding resolutely in Atlantic Canada. It all starts here.
First of all, we have to be a national bilingual party and that we speak both official languages right across Atlantic Canada. It's important to constantly dialogue with the Acadian people.
Here we have
and the
32
Newfoundlanders.
silent Liberal MPs who don't stand up for the region. The last time this happened, the NDP achieved a major breakthrough here. We'll do it again with bold solutions that change politics. The clean energy plan that I propose would create tens of thousands of clean energy jobs in wind, tidal, solar, and geothermal energy right here in Atlantic Canada. I say no to dangerous projects like Energy East. One accident is catastrophic, and it fuels climate change. 60% of BC just voted no to Kinder Morgan, led by the NDP and young voters, and soon we'll see the swearing in of John Horgan as the new NDP Premier. We opened doors to college, university, and trade school by eliminating all tuition fees. Jeremy Corbyn just received unprecedented support from young voters with this. Mr. Trudeau has mastered the shallow politics of platitudes. We need bold solutions that help Canadians. A better Canada is possible. Let's build it together.
Thank you. Guy Caron, please.
Bonjour mes amis. Depuis le début de cette course, j'ai proposé de mettre fin à la pauvreté avec un revenu de base qui serait financé par une réforme fiscale visant les mieux nantis. And this week I also announced how I would implement electoral reform. This is concrete, this is substance, and this is leadership. I have so much respect for everyone here around the table, and win or lose, we'll stand united to take on Trudeau and Scheer in 2019. We need to show Canadians that, unlike Trudeau, we will live up to our commitments. That work starts right now, and I've already put forth a progressive blueprint to make my promises a reality. In my view, it's time to take this race to a different level, to the next level, and start asking the tough questions. Charlie, you recently said that you prefer pragmatism to aspirational ideas, but we'll need to know how this will actually inspire Canadians to vote for us. Jagmeet, you entered this race late. We still haven't heard you say that win or lose, you'll still commit to the federal NDP after October. And Nikki, you spent 2 years on the road discussing the rise of precarious work, and those are incredibly important efforts. But what we haven't heard yet is specific proposals to tackle this problem. And Peter, your free tuition and affordable housing commitments are actually very commendable, but they will cost over $100 billion. And assuming that you can strike a deal with the provinces, where will the money be found? Those questions will be asked. If not by me, then they will be asked by Liberals.
Thank you. We'll hear from Charlie Angus, please.
I'm very proud to be here today.
How excited I am to be back on the rock. You know, it's the one great thing about this really long campaign is the ability to see such great regions of the country and talk with such incredible people. So what have I learned on this campaign? Well, you really see how Canada is a nation of distinct regions, and we're so much stronger when we have each other's back. That's why I was here last summer with Earl McCurdy and the provincial NDP fighting Liberal austerity to protect rural libraries. And unlike the Liberals in Ottawa with their very silent Atlantic caucus, I'm not going to sell out your region to privatization schemes and P3 hospitals. They're in it for their Bay Street pals. I'm in it for you. And on the health accord, I'm not going to shortchange rural regions with aging populations, which is why I will bring in universal pharmacare. And with the icebergs clogging the shrimp and crab grounds so that the boats can't get out there, this region is ground zero for climate change, and we need a credible plan. And to do that plan, I'm not going to pit region against region, worker against environmentalist, urban against rural, because what holds us together is so much greater than the politics that would divide us. And the politics that divide us right now are economic. As New Democrats, we have to be able to say to Canadians, we've got your back, and actually have it mean something. That's why I'm here, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Jagmeet Singh, please.
Thank you very much. So for me, this is kind of like a homecoming. It's a great pleasure to be here. I actually grew up, or I live not too far from this very stage on Waterford Bridge across from Bowring Park. It's where I first learned how to ride a bike and to swim. So anytime I do either of those two, I think about this beautiful place, St. John's. And that's why St. John's and Atlantic Canada will always have a special place in my heart. I
have met so many people who share our values in the NDP, but who haven't been able to find a place at the table. Our responsibility is to welcome them into our party.
I want to re-engage our base. I want to sign up thousands of new members. I want to fundraise so that we can win again here in St. John's, throughout the Atlantic provinces, and across this beautiful country. We can do that. We're the only party that has the courage to stand up for the people of this country. So as a new Democratic Prime Minister, I would stand up against climate change. I would stand up for electoral reform, Indigenous reconciliation, and inequality. And inequality is one of the major issues impacting our society. And that's why I'm so honored to have announced my second major policy piece, which is on income security and a tax fairness agenda. This is a bold agenda that will literally lift millions of Canadians out of poverty. And this is something we must do. Together, we can make sure that those who need help the most actually get it. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Now let's get right to the first question. This comes from Juliana in Moncton and Greg in Halifax. It's asked to all of the candidates, and you'll each have 1 minute to respond. Many people in Atlantic Canada are employed in seasonal work or work in other provinces affected by the resource boom and bust. What would you do to create well-paying jobs here in Atlantic Canada and ensure that smaller communities can attract and retain residents? We're going to begin with Peter Julian, please.
Well, we start with our clean energy program that I have proposed that would create 1 million jobs across Canada, tens of thousands of jobs here in Atlantic Canada, with the right leadership from the federal government and the right investments. We move from there to opening up to the knowledge economy, which is why I proposed eliminating tuition fees for Canadians. And the Canadian Federation of Students has a costed out proposal that would achieve just that. That means more Atlantic Canadians having access to college, university, and trade school, and then being able to work here and create jobs here afterwards. It's also assuring that there is broadband access, because the knowledge economy is often based on having access to broadband. And as you know, in Atlantic Canada, you pay the highest rates in the entire country. The federal government can change that by appropriate regulation and opening up to cooperative sector and to the public sector, to public ownership, communications companies. All of those things help to contribute to building.
Thank you. We're going to move on to Nikki Ashton, please.
Well, I come from a part of the country where seasonal work is also the norm, and we also experience boom and bust economies. In fact, in my town, there are many people that came from Newfoundland to make northern Manitoba home. And we know how difficult it is to live in a part of the country that goes through these kinds of ups and downs. First of all, I would say we need the federal government on our side, not abandoning us. And it's clear to me here in Newfoundland, whether it's in terms of the fisheries, whether it's in terms of diversification, and all across the Atlantic, the federal government is simply nowhere to be found. So we do need to stand up for diversification and invest in local economies across the Atlantic, across our region. We need to invest in processing, whether it's in terms of natural resources, whether it's in terms of harvesting. And we also need to look at public ownership and nationalization as ways of retaining the wealth, creating wealth in terms of what we need. And I'm proud that our campaign has put forward public ownership in terms of banking, in terms of pharmacare, and in terms of green energy.
Thank you. We're going to move on to Jagmeet Singh, please.
Thank you so much. I spent time in Kitividi just last September, and I met with some fishermen who were talking about the crushing reality of what's happened to the industry, and hearing their stories firsthand made me realize that we need to do a lot more in terms of building a sustainable economy. Right now, we're seeing an economy that's developed to give limited prosperity to the few, and we really need to develop a shared prosperity that ensures that there's prosperity for all. That's something that we need to move towards. We also need to realize that seasonal work, where it exists, there's working Canadians that need to have support, and that's why I was honored to release my plan on a working Canadian guarantee that would ensure that people living in those conditions are lifted out of poverty. I also released a better work agenda, talking about where there is work, you need to make sure that people have protections, that precarious employment is not something that we accept, as Justin Trudeau and the finance minister say. It's something that we are firmly opposed to. So we also need to make sure that in this economic transition, we create opportunities through innovation, creativity, and the infrastructure.
Thank you. We're going to hear from Guy Caron, please.
Alors, being the member of Parliament for Rimouski in Eastern Quebec, we have very similar economy as what we can see in Atlantic Canada as well. Lots of fisheries, of course, forestry, primary industries. So, by definition, also seasonal work. And this is a challenge that we have been tackling as well, either in Lower St. Lawrence or the Gaspé Peninsula. And the federal government has a strong role to play in this, and I've given up its role. Look, for example, at the perception now that there is out there about employment insurance. Employment insurance is seen as something that is helping people just to live between those two seasons of the seasonal work. But it can be transformative because it actually helps the way that a program like Basic Income would actually help communities to be able to take matters in their own hands. Communities know best what future that they will actually have for themselves. They need the support of the federal government. They need the support of programs like this to actually decide of their own future in very uncertain times.
Thank you. Charlie Angus, please.
Well, the Liberal government has a new plan. It's called a supercluster. Now, they had a cluster economy. Now it's a supercluster. When that fails, it'll probably become a mega cluster. And so what does that have to offer you? Very, very little. Other than the only supercluster I've seen them form is in the minister's desk in Mississauga, where they've taken control of all the regional development agencies. So ACOA is now run out of Mississauga. So, number one, we have to have a commitment from the federal government to do regional development within the regions that they're based. That's a no-brainer. And I look at the greatest export that ever came out of Atlantic Canada is not the fish and the forestry, it's the young people. And to see young people having to leave year after year, and now they're going to precarious work in Toronto and Montreal and Edmonton, we need to look at how regional development is actually giving opportunities for entrepreneurial young people who want to stay here, who want to be able to create businesses. We have to stop.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you. Well, we're moving to an open debate, so you'll get a chance. Thank you.
On the clock, I can tell.
Thank you, candidates. And thank you, Juliana and Greg, for that question. So we're going to move on to a period of open debate where all 5 candidates will have an opportunity to speak, and we'll ask the question. The floor will be yours for 4 minutes. Sorry. For too many quick Canadians, I'm missing my page here. Sorry about that. For too many Canadians, oh, I'm still missing it. Access to timely and quality health care is uncertain. What would be the top priority for your NDP government in meeting the health needs of Canadians?
Okay, well, I'll jump in. First off, you probably saw in the Globe and Mail a report about the expansion of user fees that Canadians are now paying to access the healthcare system. Shameful that when we have a public, universal, and accessible healthcare system that we're seeing more and more Canadians having to pay thousands of dollars to access that healthcare system. And we need to expand healthcare, which means having in place pharmacare, which far too many Canadians are suffering from the lack of that pharmacare, and putting in place basic dental care for all Canadians. I am moved by the story of Jason. 25 years old, he lost all his teeth because he didn't have access to basic dental care, and that helps precarious workers. Those are all ways of strengthening a healthcare system that exists right now, and an NDP government under my leadership would make sure that that is first and foremost.
I'd also say that this is a question of priorities. Right now, we also have, in the last few days, the Liberals that committed to an increased $13 billion investment in our military. And the question here with this is far beyond what they committed to in the election. And it was really a case of trying to placate Donald Trump, as though we need to do that. What we're saying is that we need to move that kind of a commitment to the real life and death needs that Canadians have, and healthcare is top of that list.
Absolutely.
Yes, we need to expand healthcare in terms of, well, first of all, getting rid of Harper's changes to the healthcare transfer. We need to invest in community-based healthcare. We need to expand pharmacare, and I'm proud of our platform, and expand into dental care and mental health services.
But Nikki, the issue here
is make sure that we commit to public. Sorry, we need to commit to public services. What we're seeing is a privatization across our country when it comes to healthcare. Too often, public services are now being delivered privately, and this privatization is creating a two-tier system that's definitely decimating this beautiful medical, universal medical care system that we've implemented, and we need to defend that. Make sure that it's one-tier system, that it's publicly funded, that it's robust, and that it takes care of the needs of the people.
But what's facing us right now in Atlantic Canada is the health accord that these Liberal premiers signed off on and that the Liberal Atlantic caucus supported, which penalizes regions with rural populations and aging populations. And guess who's going to take it on the chin? Because if we don't have that kind of funding from the federal government, we're unable to deal with the overall crisis, particularly in rural regions. Now, all my colleagues are talking pharmacare. We've been put out a plan for pharmacare. If we invest that $1 billion, we get $10 billion in savings. So that's a start. But we have to look at the role of the federal government in dealing with the provinces and territories on a health accord that respects the needs of Atlantic Canada and rural regions.
I fully agreed, and obviously we'll be in agreement because we created healthcare, and we were all frustrated with the decisions of the Conservatives and the Liberals to actually decrease the funding for the provinces, and we'll all be in agreement for more funding. But fundamentally, the role that the federal government can play as a leader in healthcare, which is a provincial jurisdiction, is to start giving the sense, not only allowing to share the experience province by province of what's happening, the best practices, but also starting to talk about integrated healthcare. Right now, we're seeing all the different components as being separate entities, be it pharmacare, be it home care, be it palliative care, be it long-term care. We're all seeing that as bits and pieces that we need to find and integrate in Medicare, and that's the wrong approach. I remember, and I was working on healthcare when I was at the Council of Canadians, when I became aware of the work of Michael Rackless, who actually had wonderful proposals to actually help the provinces and help the federal government at the same time to move in the right direction and better spend that money that we are giving to the provinces and do it in the constructive fashion.
We need to look at healthcare as an investment. When we invest in our people, our society is better. Healthcare is one of the most important investments, and takes a cost to that.
Unfortunately, our time is up for the open debate. Thank you very much. So we're going to move on now to our French question. It's intended that the candidates will answer the question in the language in which it's asked, but it's not mandatory. Candidates will have 60 seconds to respond.
We will now move to the only French question. The candidates will have 60 seconds each to respond. In the last week, the federal government has unveiled its new defense policy, as well as the foreign policy. In your opinion, what are the main gaps in those policies? And what would you do as Prime Minister to fill those gaps?
Charlie Angus.
First of all, I have a lot of respect for the professionalism of our troops. I would make the necessary investments to ensure proper training. And I would also make the necessary investments to ensure access to health care, medical, and high-quality services for our troops and their families. I am not confident that Mr. Trudeau will defend Canadian values with that plan, because as far as I'm concerned, there are a lot of concerns about there in terms of Mr. Trudeau's direction. He said he intends to support the ballistic missile plan, and there are a lot of problems with that plan because of international law, and it's necessary for Canada to put in a plan that respects our values as Canadians and our priorities. Thank you. Guy Caron. Thank you. We heard two things this week with respect to the new defense policy. On the one hand, we're told that it will allow Canada to be more independent with its own policy. On the other hand, they're doing exactly what Donald Trump has asked us to do. So I think that this week was very revealing when it comes to the lack of independence we see in the Liberal government compared to our U.S. counterparts. We need to stand up for Canada and for our own priorities. As for defense, we have men and women in uniform that warrant our respect and all the support we can give them for the work that they do. And we have to be able to give them better equipment and fulfill their needs. Now, right now, the procurement policies are terrible, and we see that in the case of the F-35s, but also with respect to the Navy fleet. We need to rethink all of those policies.
Peter Julian.
Well, when we talk about development assistance, I believe they have announced a new approach with respect to international development assistance, but there's not 1 cent more in there. That's what is terrible when it comes to the Liberal policies. It's always the appearances that matter rather than the substance of the policies. The other aspect and the other major flaw in what was announced this week is a massive increase in defense spending. So we're talking about more than $60 billion over the next decades that will be invested in the military. But we have other priorities. There's a housing crisis, a healthcare crisis. There's a lack of access to post-secondary education. There is a terrible lack of programs that help with mental health issues. So for all those reasons, I would cancel that massive spending. Thank you. Nikki Ashton. Well, I'd say that the Liberal increase is unacceptable. It's a question of simply following in the footsteps of the Trump government, which does not reflect our Canadian values. And of course, we do have other priorities we should be investing in, such as health care, eliminating tuition fees, and also helping our veterans. We know that Canada has sent a number of young men and women to Afghanistan and elsewhere around the world, and the government abandoned them when they got back home. That's where we need to be investing. We also need to be clear. For us as the NDP, we have the history of being a party that is in favor of peace, that works towards diplomacy and development. That the Liberal priorities do not reflect our position, and we have to defend our own position. Now, we are told that this is a feminist policy that the Liberals have just brought in, but it's a feminist policy with no substance. Thank you. Yes, thank you. It's really a question of priorities. We see a government that's saying one thing, but it's not reflected in the reality on the ground. What we need are lots of investments, as we've heard, in such things as housing, health care, and so forth. But what the government has said in terms of what it wants to spend on, well, that doesn't reflect what we believe we should be spending on. So what we need is new leadership, and we're not getting that with the Liberals. The Liberals have simply caved into Trump, and even as they say that they're sending a different message, but that's not true. And it's disappointing and unacceptable.
Merci. Thank you. We'll now move to another question, and each candidate will have 60 seconds to reply. The question is, Canadians are buying 2 million new cars every year, yet only 20,000 of those vehicles are electric. What is your plan to change that? We're going to begin with Nikki Ashton, please.
Well, this speaks to the need for a federal government to invest in a green transition. Obviously, the NDP for a long time has been an advocate around investments in public transit, recognizing that not only is that a way to better our lives, but it's also a very clear way to better our environment. Now, I would say that that the Liberals have talked a good talk on this front, but yet the investments haven't been there. Our campaign has talked about the need to move to a carbon-free economy. Investments in public transit are key. But I also want to recognize that many people that live in rural Canada, northern Canada, like the part of the country I'm from, require a great deal of help when it comes to transitioning to a carbon-free economy, and that includes retrofits, support for being able to engage in green renovations of our infrastructure, and looking at the kind of challenges that people face on an economic front. These kinds of investments would make sense for everybody across our country, economically and environmentally.
Thank you. Peter Julian's next, please.
We need to make sure that Canada is part of the wave of the future, which is electric vehicles. We've had Mr. Trudeau turning down applications for clean energy electric vehicles to be manufactured here in Canada. And Mr. Trudeau has said no to those manufacturing facilities here. So we have manufacturers that are now looking overseas. Incredible that a federal government would not understand the importance of what is an emerging manufacturing giant. Electric vehicles around the world over the next decade, we're going to see more and more of them on the roads. So Canada has an opportunity to produce electric vehicles, and Canada also has an opportunity to attract electric vehicles by establishing charging stations right across the country. I proposed establishing postal banking. I also think our network of post offices that are on highways across this country should be the first places that we put charging stations so tourists and electric vehicles can go right across the country and come here to Newfoundland and Labrador.
Thank you. Charlie Angus, please.
You need a government that actually has a jobs plan, that understands the need to do diversification. So we've taken a huge hit here in Newfoundland and other regions with the downturn in Fort Mac. While I was out in Alberta talking with energy workers who are doing the diversification training, but they have no partner at the federal level. That's crazy. We're never going to meet our targets unless we have a government that's willing to work with them. But I was also at the Kami plant in Ingersoll, the most efficient manufacturing plant in North America, and they're shipping the jobs to Mexico. And what I learned is it doesn't matter how efficient you are, how hard you work, how much you give up, that corporate interest is still going to take more. So you need a government that's got your back, that says we are going to insist that if we're going to do investments in an industrial manufacturing sector, it's going to be for the benefit of Canadians, that it's going to have a focus on diversification, and it's going to meet our green energy opportunities, because it's staring us in the face and we got a government that's selling us down the river.
Thank you. Guy Caron.
Well, transportation, be it passenger vehicles or even freight, is actually 24 to 26% of our greenhouse gas emissions. So it's major, and we need to tackle this right now. If we have such low numbers, it's because obviously, and that's a self-evident, that there's not enough demand, and the supply won't follow if there's not enough demand. Why isn't there enough demand? There is a lack of trust here in the capacity and the ability of electric vehicles to actually provide for our needs. People are not necessarily trusting the autonomy and the ability to carry on their daily lives with an electric car, but most of them can. And there's a lot of work to do in terms of awareness, but also in working with the provinces to actually install those charging stations, to tell people, well, you know what, the autonomy that you'll have will be there, and that those charging stations will actually help you to spend not more time than you will need to actually stop for dinner. So let's move in that direction of raising awareness.
Thank you. Jagmeet Singh.
Thank you very much. I mean, if we're honest about it, how many people can really afford to buy an electric car or a hybrid car? I think much of the issue is affordability. People are struggling to make ends meet, and to think about buying an electric car is a luxury that escapes many people. It has to be affordable, and to make it affordable, one, we need to make sure we have a good jobs plan to make sure that people have good work. and work that allows them to not only make ends meet, but to make investments in things like electric vehicles. I think if we don't have the job strategy and the supports in place, people won't be able to do it. But it's also the government's responsibility to encourage investment in this industry so that we can actually develop cars that have longer range. I know in a lot of regions, the range issue makes people not even consider buying an electric car because it might work in a small urban area like Toronto, but once you leave the urban areas and you're into suburban areas, there's just not enough range for it to make sense. So there's a lot we can do. I think it is the future. I think there's no doubt about it, but we need greater investment.
Thank you. We're going to move on now to another open debate for 4 minutes amongst all the candidates. As before, the floor will be open to all of you. And the question now is going to be from Richard from New Brunswick, who asks, when a company goes bankrupt, workers' pensions are often left unfunded, while corporate assets go to lenders and lawyers. How would you protect pensioners against claims from investors and other creditors?
I can start with this because I actually worked on this file when I was at the Communications, Energy and Paper Workers Union of Canada before my election, and I'd like to commend the work of many of my predecessors, but also John Rafferty, who was a member of Parliament, carried this file. And the answer is very simple. It needs to actually be seen as a guaranteed when you're actually going into bankruptcy proceedings. Right now, everybody else but those pensioners are can actually receive their money. So there can be a simple change in the legislation to ensure that the pensioners will actually have their money guaranteed way above and beyond the bankers, who, because right now of the power that they have, the capital that they are putting, are actually pressuring for them to actually be paid first.
I would also say that this requires, obviously legislation, but immense political will. You know, a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to visit with steelworkers in Hamilton, who were bought out by a U.S. company, not unlike many communities that have been affected by foreign takeovers. And one of the first things that was at risk was their pensions. I mean, let's be honest, pensions are deferred wages. This is money of workers that they have created, and for companies to declare bankruptcy to play with those kinds of investments is just unjust. And so, I mean, it's clear that the Liberals certainly aren't on the side of workers when it comes to protecting their pensions. The Conservatives certainly weren't. The NDP has a history of being that party, and I believe that we need to be that party in a much bigger way as we see corporate concentration grow and corporations become, greedier and greedier.
The thing
We're
is,
seeing
inequality isn't
pensions
just
taken from workers right across this country. And we've seen those workers often go to court. And the Supreme Court said, both to Liberals, Conservatives, governments, and to all parliamentarians, that it is up to legislators to make sure that pensioners and pensions are actually preferred creditors. Yeah. And so it is up to us, and I pledge to bring forward a Pension Protection Act that will ensure that pensions are first when it comes to bankruptcy, so that those pensions are protected. The Supreme Court has told us the government should be doing this. It is shameful that Mr. Trudeau is not reacting.
Well, inequality is not just a mistake. Inequality doesn't just happen. Inequality is a result of clear decisions that prioritize those who have wealth over those who don't have wealth. It's done on purpose. It's structured that way. And this is another example. When pensions don't receive priority, that's a strategic decision to ensure that workers don't get protection, workers don't have an opportunity for shared prosperity, and those who already have wealth have a priority. That's a clear decision that's being made in our society, and we need to say no to that as a decision and implement a change in that decision.
The issue here is about us being ripped off through 1,000 loopholes and 1,000 cuts that have destroyed the middle class. And I want to commend my colleagues in the federal caucus for the work that's been done on pensions, the fight of Abitibi workers and Nortel workers. But then I'm looking at Bill Morneau. I mean, he's the privatized pension king of Canada, and he's now in charge of Bill C-27. Are you kidding me? They will defend their friends. They will never defend you and I. When they tell us to suck it up, that it's the new normal, that you shouldn't have any kind of economic security, you need a government that's going to go in and push back, because you know what? We've been reasonable for way too long. And when I see seniors who put 35 years into a plant and they're told their pensions drop to 35% of what they are owed, that's not right. Not when they're giving the money to hedge fund operators. No way.
Absolutely. That's why we need to not only ensure that we protect pensions, but we also need to make sure that as a federal government, we step up to protect seniors, people who are most impacted by this. And that's why I was honored to release
Thank you. Unfortunately, that's it for the open debate. Thanks, candidates. And thank you, Richard, for that question. We're now going to move on to some lightning rounds. So each candidate will have 15 seconds to respond to 2 separate questions. We're going to start with number 1 is, as Prime Minister, what will be your first piece of legislation? I'm going to start with Guy Carron.
Prime Minister, my first legislation would actually to implement electoral reform, mixed member proportional. I announced it this week, and I think we need to send that strong signal that, unlike the Liberals who have reneged on that promise, that we will do it, and that will be our priority.
Thank you. Now we'll have Jagmeet Singh, please.
I think we need to address inequality, so my first piece of legislation would be the income security and taxation fairness to make sure that we redistribute wealth in a more just way.
Thank you. And then we'll have Nikki Ashton, please.
So if I were to be Prime Minister, I would be putting forward a vision on economic justice, which is comprehensive. It would include tax reform, increasing the corporate tax rate, saying no to bad trade deals that are selling us out, and free tuition.
Thank you. Peter Julian.
Electoral reform, but also ensuring climate justice and transitioning to clean energy, and a housing first bill that actually gives the right to housing to every single Canadian. Nobody should be sleeping outside in our country.
Thank you. Charlie Angus.
Well, first piece of legislation, 2 things. I'll sell off 24 Sussex as a group home. I think that'll help the property values. But number 1, we're going to make sure that no more Indigenous children die because government refuses to spend the money. We will make us compliant with the human rights law.
Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to the second question, and this one is, who is your favorite Newfoundland and Labrador comedian? We're going to start with Jagmeet Singh, please.
Well, I had the tremendous honor of being able to meet both Mr. Rick Mercer and Mr. Critch at a press gallery event, so I have to give them both the shout out.
Okay, thank you. Peter Julian.
Buddy, what's his name and the other fellers? The chocolate song is kind of a personal anthem of mine. You know, give me some chocolate, I need a boost. Great musical act, great comedian.
Perfect, thank you. We'll move on to Guy Carron.
I'm thinking of a lot of Newfoundlanders who actually left us an impression, but none have left a stronger impression on me than Mary Walsh. I had a chance to work with her, and she's an amazing woman, but also extremely funny.
Thank you. Nikki Ashton.
So I would say a shout out to Mary Walsh for not just her comedy, but also her activism. And I am also a fan of Mark Critch, who interviewed me so well and knew so many positive things, I guess, about our story and our campaign. And I want to give him a shout out. Thank you. And Charlie Angus.
Well, I'm going to go to music, and I'll go with the 3 R's, Ryan's Fancy, Hey Rosetta, and Ron Hines. I mean, yeah, this is great for comedy, but the music here, nothing beats that. And I was just at Fred's Music. I want to give a shout out to Fred's Music. Picked up some great vinyl here.
Excellent, thank you. So we're going to move on to a new and exciting segment that we haven't done in previous debates called Question Period. So in this portion of the debate, each candidate will be given a chance to ask a question of another candidate. The candidate who asks the question gets to choose who and what they ask, and it's not known in advance. So the asker will get 30 seconds to ask their question. The responding candidate then gets 30 seconds to respond, and the asking candidate then gets 30 seconds to follow up, with the respondent getting 30 seconds to conclude. Also, the question must not simply seek agreement. It must ask for clarification or make a distinction. The first question will go to Nikki Ashton, please.
Well, my question is to Jagmeet Singh, and it's a follow-up to a question that I raised in the last debate in Sudbury. You did talk about standing up against climate change. You did talk about standing up for Indigenous rights. Well, last week, or 2 weeks ago, I called on all candidates to stand up for Indigenous rights and against climate change in opposition to Kinder Morgan. Our federal caucus is opposed, and I believe that we can't sit on the sidelines when it comes to such an important issue. I'm wondering where you stand on Kinder Morgan.
Thank you very much for the question. I think it's something that's so important for us us to come out on. I will be releasing my response to Kinder Morgan as well as a climate change plan very shortly. But I can say that I believe as a leader, we need to find ways to bring people together, and we need to make sure that we speak to all people impacted. So I'll be reaching out to Alberta and to now the new government that's going to be formed in BC before I make this announcement.
So I do think that NDP members do want to know where their candidates stand on the issues, and of course a number of us have already indicated that. But I also want to be very clear that the federal caucus is opposed. So are you suggesting that you're considering putting forward policy that would go against the federal caucus position? I mean, we are in the House right now fighting against Kinder Morgan and obviously Trudeau's agenda. I mean, I will say that the time is now to take a clear stand on climate change and to support Indigenous rights where Indigenous peoples want us on their side.
So let's make it absolutely clear. All New Democrats believe in the United Nations Declaration, absolutely unequivocally. All New Democrats also believe in protecting the environment, but also all New Democrats believe in leadership that unites and that doesn't divide. And so I think it's important to be respectful and hear the concerns of folks in BC and folks in Alberta before I release my decision. I don't take this decision lightly. I take it very seriously, and I want to understand the moving situations given that we have a new government hopefully very soon in BC, and also speak with Rachel Notley, who's done so much.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll move on to Guy Caron, please.
See, Nikki, my question will be for you. I launched my campaign with a big transformative idea to eliminate poverty, which is basic income. It will lift everyone at least to the level of poverty, to the poverty line, and will do so without eliminating social services. I did announce the policy 3 months ago, and I still don't know what you're thinking about it. So I'd like to know where you stand on my basic income proposal.
I think it is a worthwhile idea, and it certainly comes up in discussions around precarious work. And I appreciate that you brought it forward as part of this leadership race. But I think there's some major red flags. One is that there are many people on the right that are big fans of basic annual income, like Kathleen Wynne, a liberal, but very much on putting forward a fiscal right policy. And I would say others, including conservatives, that put it forward. I'm also concerned that it doesn't get at the systemic issues that push precarious work.
And let's work on precarious work, yes, but one doesn't preclude the other. If you're going towards basic income, you're addressing the issue of poverty straight up. And Kathleen Wynne, yes, she's proposing a basic income that is unlike everything I'm proposing, because she's proposing the conservative case, where conservatives want to scrap social programs to get basic income. We can actually have basic income supplementing, topping up what the provinces are doing on social services. So this is a transformative, progressive idea that we have to claim for ourselves.
But wouldn't you agree that a key priority needs to be expanding our social safety net? I mean, that's where true universality can be seen, when we expand healthcare, pharmacare, dental care, and when we look at free tuition, when we look at a national housing program. One of the things that many people talk about is the need to lift everybody up, but recognizing that we're not all living in the same kind of situation. While I think that you've put forward an important sentiment, our campaign believes that expanding the social safety net is the way to go forward.
Thank you. Up next, we have Charlie Angus.
Thank you. Well, I was wanting so much to get into that discussion, and I think what Guy's done is really great in for bringing this forward on guaranteed income. I've been looking into it, though, and I've been reading from a lot of very progressive economists, and there's serious questions, and one is the price. The number that's been talked about by many credible people is about $300 billion, which is 17% of our gross domestic product, and double what anything that the provinces and territories are putting together. So it will be cut.
Now, the idea, yes, what you're referring to is a different model. There's 50 different models of basic income. You can actually go and look at it. The one that you're referring to is actually a universal model, which I'm not proposing. I'm proposing really a model that will top up any source of income, be it working income or support services. If you're on social assistance and you can't reach the line of poverty, you will actually get basic income to reach you to that level. And the fact that it's linked to LICO allows it to be modulated according to where you live. So if you live in a large city...
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I guess my concern is most of the areas to deal with this are under provincial jurisdiction. And so you have a right-wing government and a provincial jurisdiction. You have to negotiate with them. And then you also have the issue, if they decide to whack services like Mike Harris did because they know the feds would come in and cover it, you still haven't given us a costed-out plan. So how much would it cost to be able to top up all the provincial programs across the country and keep universal programs and access?
Let's be clear. Federally, we already have basic income. It's called Canada Child Benefit, and it's called Guaranteed Income Supplements. Those are forms of basic income using the tax system. So by having this not targeted to those groups, but to everyone, we can actually work without the consent of the provinces because it's a fiscal measure. It's something that we do through the tax system. And we can actually ensure that those programs will not be cut by telling the provinces that if they are reducing their level of support services, then their residents will not access it.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from Peter Julian, please.
Thank you. My question is to Jagmeet. Glad you're in the race, but I'm disconcerted by your non-response around pipelines and Kinder Morgan. Kinder Morgan, in the recent BC election, was the major issue. I traveled across BC. I saw the reaction from people. 60% of British Columbians voted for parties that oppose Kinder Morgan. One accident on our coastline could wipe out the coast for a generation. Why have you not made up your mind on Kinder Morgan?
So as I stated before, I'm sure you heard the answer, I've worked both in campaigns with BC, NDP, and Mr. Horgan, John Horgan, as well as with Rachel Notley and the NDP out there. I've campaigned in both provinces, and I think it's important that before I make any announcement that I meet with both of them, and I am planning to release a climate change plan which will address all pipelines as well, and I'm looking forward to doing that.
We have a situation where British Columbians have said no. We have the federal caucus who has said no. There is a very clear consensus among New Democrats. I do not understand your hesitation about saying no to a project that has such a profound downside for British Columbians. It wipes out the only value-added jobs that we have, the last oil refinery, Chevron in Burnaby, and it creates nothing for British Columbians. Why the hesitation?
So I am honored as a New Democrat to share the same values as all New Democrats, that we want to protect the environment, that we want to make sure we stand up to climate change, and that we want to respect Indigenous rights. And I'm also I take my position very seriously, and I look forward to announcing my decision on these pipelines as well as an entire climate plan. But I want to be respectful of the realities, so I look forward to meeting both with BC NDP folks and folks from Alberta. And Rachel Notley has done a lot, and she's taken a lot of heat, and I think both parties deserve respect, and I'm looking to do that as a leader.
Thank you, and we're going to hear again from you, Jagmeet Singh. It's your opportunity to ask a question.
Sure, thank you very much. My question is to Mr. Caron. I really support the idea of electoral reform, and I think it's an amazing initiative. I want to salute you for raising that and bringing that forward as something you want to see happen. My concern is, though, you seem to have conceded the next election. You're already talking about a minority government and what would you do in a minority government. Why is it that you're already conceding the next election?
Actually, I'm not. The first thing I said is that NDP, it will be the first bill put forth by NDP in government. And in the case of NDP having the balance of power, it will be an unavoidable condition that will be putting on any support of the NDP. So I'm looking at both sides of the scenario, and I'm looking at the NDP to actually form government so that we will not have any obstacles in implementing that electoral reform that Justin Trudeau did not put forth.
I don't think anyone doubts our commitment as New Democrats. What we say and what we believe in, we follow through on. Our principles stand for themselves. But I don't think we need to be giving up next elections and even talking about minority governments. We need to be running a bold campaign that inspires people that we will win. And we can't let the idea of losing into people's minds. So I disagree with that idea.
Obviously, we need to play to win. This is what I've been saying since for the beginning. I'm the one who actually can beat Justin Trudeau on progressive ideas, that I can beat Scheer and Trudeau in Quebec as well. So this is something I've said since the beginning. And I just wanted people to be clear that on electoral reform, regardless of the composition of the election in 2019, the NDP will be there to actually put electoral reform first and foremost. This has been in our books for a very long time, and unfortunately, people have been let down by Trudeau, who actually stole it.
Thank you. Excellent. Thanks, everyone. We're going to move on to another question for all candidates, and again, you'll have 1 minute to reply. The question is, the inshore fishery is Atlantic Canada's largest private sector employer. and the economic engine for hundreds of small coastal communities. Lack of enforcement by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans is allowing large corporations and investors, including foreign companies, to secretly gain control over inshore fishing licenses. What would you do to protect the inshore fishery and the economy of Atlantic Canada's coastal communities? Charlie Angus, you're first.
Well, this is a really important question, and the work and protecting of inshore fisheries is vital for communities, but also for sustainability. So we have to have clear enforcement, but we have also a number of other issues we have to start dealing with to protect that. We have a government that just signed a deal with Europe that's allowing the unprocessed fish to Europe, and they were supposed to give some kind of compensation package, weren't they? But I guess Justin Trudeau forgot to send it. That has a huge impact. And again, with the crab and shrimp boats being affected by icebergs right now, this is frontline on climate change. And where is the plan to work not just with the fishers, but the processing plants and the communities, and to start developing a long-term plan to protect our inshore fisheries?
Thank you. Jagmeet Singh.
Thank you very much. I actually had a great opportunity to speak with a legend in Newfoundland, Mr. Jack Harris, on this issue, so I want to thank you for some of the insight. I think it's absolutely important that we acknowledge that those communities that were hit the hardest, they need to be protected the most. And any quota that we develop, any quota system and its enforcement needs to make sure that those communities that were decimated as a result of the moratorium, they receive first dibs on quota and enforcement to ensure that we support inshore fisheries, but also the impact of offshore fishery on local economy as well. We need to make sure that our priority is inshore and not and local communities and fishermen union communities, and that they get the precedence and the support.
Thank you. We'll hear from Guy Cal, please.
Yeah, obviously, this is always a tricky issue, and I've actually had a chance to be a deputy critic for Fisheries and Oceans for a while, as well as Atlantic Canada representative. And the federal government has really made a mess of this. We're trying to ask the questions in the House regarding the last in, first out policy. There was a report that was published recently. I know that my colleagues have done lots of work on the separation of the fleet separation as well. Right now, the priority of the federal government, as it's been since it's conservative or federal, has not been in favor of the fishing industry here. On the contrary, it's been in a disrespectful way of addressing the issue in economic fashion, not acknowledging the importance for the communities. And this has to change under an NP government. So I will actually ensure that Fisheries and Oceans will actually work together and ensure that Nova Scotians and Newfoundlanders and Quebecers will actually work together.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we'll move to Nikki Ashton, please.
Well, what we need is the federal government that's going to be on the side of fishers here in Newfoundland and fishing communities. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to meet with an incredible activist with the Fish, Food and Allied Workers who talked about growing up in a fishing community and what it means to not have the federal government on your side. So whether it's in terms of opposing foreign ownership that sells us out, that whether it's in terms of opposing the growing corporate concentration that's attacking the ability of individual fishers and fishing communities to chart their own course, whether it's standing up for the kind of investments that need to take place, and again through a COA and through federal funding that could help support not just fishing but processing as well. I mean, we heard about how expensive fishing licenses are and how that cost is preventing young fishers from entering an industry that they want to be part of, that they grew up in, and that needs to be addressed. We heard about the importance of respecting the principle of adjacency and making sure that harvesters, people that live on the coast, have the benefit of the resource next to them.
Thank you. We'll move on now to Peter Julian, please.
2 generations of my family have been fishers off the West Coast, and we've seen firsthand the mismanagement of DFO and Ottawa when it comes to our fisheries. So the action plan to revive fisheries is to make sure that those licenses go to community fishers, that we're not selling licenses to big corporations. We need to make sure that we're protecting value added, and that means not signing trade deals where we simply put the raw product off to another country for those additional jobs. It also means that we try to develop a seafood industry in Atlantic Canada that is long-term and sustainable. What we are seeing now, and Sustainable Blue is the best example of that in Atlantic Canada, is the possibility of closed containment, allowing an environmentally healthy type of product that can be put on the market. And given Atlantic Canada's reputation for quality seafood, that is something that could produce jobs right across Atlantic Canada and in communities everywhere on the coast.
Thank you. Thank you, candidates. So we're going to move on now, again, to another open debate. But this time, we're going to speed it up a little, and the candidates will only have a total of 2.5 minutes amongst themselves to respond. So this means I may have to jump in to keep things moving. Here is your question. The recent protests at Muskrat Falls highlight the conflict between two competing worldviews, that of Indigenous peoples' stewardship of their lands and waters, and that of proponents of large-scale development projects. What policies would an NDP government put forward to address this conflict?
We would put forward UNDRIP. We would protect the rights on the land. The fact that this project went ahead when they weren't dealing with the methyl mercury issues is unconscionable. The fact that Beatrice Hunter was put in a men's prison 1,000 kilometers from home, that's not acceptable. That's not something that's on in 2017. We've got to do better in this country.
Any energy project in our country needs to have not just, as Nikki said earlier in another debate, not just the consent of, or not just the consultation of, but the consent of and the partnership of Indigenous people. That's a fundamental thing for any energy project. And though this is a great energy project in terms of clean energy, it can never be a good project if it's going to hurt Indigenous people and if it's going to poison the water and poison the land. So we need to make sure it's protected that way.
We're talking about free, prior, and informed consent. We're not talking about two worldviews. That is how resource projects and that is how these hydroelectric and other projects are going to have to be developed, ensuring that we adhere the reconciliation and to the obligation for free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous peoples. That is the only way for development going forward.
And I would challenge the premise of the question as well. Beatrice Hunter stood up on behalf not of just her people, and not just on behalf of many Indigenous people, but many people that share her view, that share the position that projects, whether it's Muskrat Dam or other projects across the country, including pipeline projects, go against climate change commitments, go against the ability to, stewardship of lands that belong to Indigenous peoples. But I would also say that it's important to recognize we just don't live in the 1950s anymore, where governments and corporations can just run roughshod over the rights of Indigenous peoples and over our environmental rights. The only party that can stand up with Beatrice Hunter, the only party that can stand up with Indigenous activists, with environmental activists, with people in communities who care, is the NDP, and we need to do that.
I would say that this is part actually of this disturbing trend we're seeing right now, and once again there will be a credibility to be regained with First Nations, because we've seen commitments from the Trudeau Liberals in terms of the consultation and the consent we should have from First Nations. And now in the case of Muskrat Falls and also the site C Dam in BC, we're saying that once again that those words meant nothing. So not only are we going to have to implement and be strong on these principles ourselves, but we'll need to actually regain the trust of First Nations that's been broken.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for that. And since that was a great bit of fun, we're going to do that again. Here's another question for open debate. And once again, you'll have 2.5 minutes. All right, so here's the question. What lessons can the NDP draw from last week's British election?
Well, I would say,
sure that you can win. If you're bold and you're progressive, there's no question that people will support that. We need to do that. We can make that happen here in Canada as well.
What he said, Jeremy Corbyn, was going across the United Kingdom saying that we will eliminate tuition fees for post-secondary education. And the reaction from young voters was unprecedented. 2/3 of younger voters across the United Kingdom voted for the Labour Party. If that is not a clear example of the type of bold policies that will bring us to get that type of support here in Canada, I don't know what there is. That is a very clear example of success with bold policies.
Economic justice is another big issue. We need to make sure that we address economic justice in our society. That's a massive problem. That's why a lot of people turn to the Labour Party. They saw their communities being torn and ravaged by poverty. And it's a real solution to that they turn to the Labour Party.
I would say that something else that I've seen from the campaign and that we've seen from the Bernie Sanders campaign also, and we know how inspiring they've been in the US and the UK, but there's also one thing that we have to learn from, is that they've said not only what they will do, but how they will do it. And that's critical to actually gain the trust. Bernie Sanders actually didn't just say we need to increase accessibility to post-secondary education. He said exactly how he would actually do it. Jeremy Corbyn actually at the beginning was talking about what needed to be done, and quickly he actually said how he will do it, and he gained the trust of the people.
And what Jeremy Corbyn and British Labour did, let's be clear, is went up against the status quo, including within their own party. They put forward an anti-neoliberal, anti-austerity agenda that spoke to the British people, and that spoke in particularly to young people. And as a millennial myself, it was clear to me why so many young people came out and voted, because not only did he put forward bold policies, and yes, we all agree on that, but he gave hope. He gave hope that things can be different, that we don't need to, that we can stand up to corporate power, that we can stand up and say the word nationalization, that we can talk about stopping precarious work, and that's why people came out.
Angus, please.
Well, the issue of hope is really important. The issue of saying what you're going to do and you're going to follow through. And there's a group in the New Democrats who always think if we're a little more careful and act more like liberals, we're going to win. And boy, what's our record on that, folks? It ain't all that good. So let's say what we're going to do and follow through. And that is the lesson that we need to learn.
He cared about people, genuinely. And I think that came across, that care.
Thank you. All right, thanks everyone. And now we're going to swing back around to the question period segment. As before, each candidate will have 30 seconds to ask a question of another candidate. The responding candidate will get 30 seconds to respond. The asking candidate then gets 30 seconds to follow up, and the respondent will have a 30-second conclusion. Candidates must now ask a question from a different candidate than they asked in the first question period. So to begin, we're going to have Charlie Angus. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you. It's been really exciting, Jagmeet, that you've joined our race, and a leader's a builder. But if you don't win in October, do you go back to work at the province where you were the deputy leader, or do you stay on with us to help us build a team at the federal level in 2019? Because I think that that's something that people here, certainly across Canada, where your teams are going to want to know. Where will you be? Will you be with us, or do you go back to Ontario?
Well, you'll know my track record, Charlie, that as a deputy leader and just as an MPP, I've campaigned across this country. In Alberta, I campaigned with New Democrats. In BC, I campaigned in Nova Scotia. I campaigned in the federal election very aggressively for my riding, and I'll continue to do that. New Democrats need to be united across this country, provincial and federal, and I'll continue to do everything I can to make sure that our progressive vision, our bold vision for a better and more just Canada is realized across this beautiful country.
So does that mean we're waiting for the policy announcement? Because it's a simple question. We're getting set for an election in Ontario where they're going for government, and we have to be at the federal level ready to go. You have to make a decision. And I guess I'm asking you this because you're telling Canadians to have courage and join you. I would suggest that you could show courage and tell us, are you going to join us? Simple question.
Sometimes people can't take yes for an answer. I said, yes, I will absolutely continue to fight, not only in my riding. It's not your turn, my friend. It's not your turn, my friend. It's, I will continue to fight in the provincial level. I'll continue to fight in other provinces. I'll continue to fight on the federal level, as I've done before, as my track record shows. I'll continue to do that because that's what New Democrats need to do. And I would be honored to continue to do that. As long as the people give me this beautiful opportunity, I will continue to serve in any way I can to make sure that our progressive views are...
Thank you. Thank you. We'll now have Nikki Ashton.
So my question is to you, Charlie, and I wanted to get your thoughts on the proposal for free tuition. As you know, student debt is a huge burden for many young people across Canada, an average of $28,000 per person when we're looking at that kind of debt. And it has everything to do with the rise in tuition fees across this country. Many countries in the world around the world have free tuition, some that are not as wealthy as us. What do you think?
I think it's a fantastic step forward. It's where we need to go. The question for me right now is, what is the cost? How do we implement it with provincial jurisdictions? Right now, under the federal government, what we can do is we can end the crushing levels of interest on student debt, because it's unconscionable that Bombardier gets interest-free loans and students don't. So I'd like to ask you, Nikki, you've said it's free tuition. What's the plan and what's the cost?
Well, thankfully, there are people that have done significant work on this front. I want to acknowledge the work of the CFS and the CCPA, who have proposed reinstating federal funding to the tune of $3.8 billion. And, you know, I mean, we just saw an increased military spending to $13 billion. So I see taking away part of that right off the bat as a possibility. But I think it is about pragmatism to talk about free tuition. 70% of jobs today require a post-secondary education. We can't afford to indebt generations of people. Don't you agree that's pragmatic?
I totally agree it's pragmatic, and we need to move there. This is a fundamental. The crushing levels of debt are unsustainable. You've thrown out a figure of $3.8 billion. I don't think that that's getting us all the way. You said you'll take it from the military. I'm open to that idea as well. But what we need to do is say, what are we going to do in the meantime in dealing with provincial jurisdictions, some of which are universities that may crank up the debt or costs? So I would like to hear more from you in terms of exactly how do we implement this, because I don't want to give false.
Thank you. We'll move on now to Guy Caron.
Thank you very much, Charlie. And that's an agreement thing, but I think you'll agree with me that the key to victory in 2019 will actually to be regaining the strength we have in Quebec. We have 16 great MPs right now from Quebec, but we need to know how you actually intend to regain the lost seats and demonstrate that we do have very strong roots in la belle province.
Cette question est très importante.
That question is
On
very
a beaucoup
important.
de succès en 2011.
We had a lot of success in 2011 thanks to our work with Jack Layton and the progressive movement in Quebec. But in 2015, look at the electoral platform. Where was the plan to respond to the needs and values of Quebecers? It wasn't there. So I intend to work with the Quebec caucus and Quebec volunteers to introduce a plan that reflects their values. That's great. So, in fact, you would be in favor of Rebecca Blakey's recommendations in her post-electoral report. The platform is critical, and if you are leader and you have to debate Justin Trudeau and Andrew Scheer, how do you intend to put forward Quebec's needs and values in your election platform, and how can you focus on that? That's a good question. I represent a francophone region in Ontario, and I am quite familiar with the values of Quebecers, with their language and identity, and the need to protect that identity. The role of the NDP in 2019 will be to work with Quebec activists and volunteers to reflect their views and represent their views. And as leader,
Merci. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we'll hear from Jagmeet Singh.
Sure, thank you very much. So my question is to Peter Julian. Peter, you've done a lot of work throughout your life in terms of addressing the issues of Canadians with disabilities, and I want to salute you for that great work. What would be some strategies that you would have in mind in terms of addressing the needs of Canadians with disabilities and how we can lift them out of poverty?
Well, thank you. Before I was elected to Parliament, I ran the Western Institute for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. And we formed with other groups that serve disabilities a disability employment network, which was a remarkable way of actually opening doors for people with disabilities to get long-term jobs. It was win-win because the employers could benefit from having that very loyal and effective workforce, and the people with disabilities ended up with long-term employment. All it takes is the federal government to show leadership, and it starts with providing those bridges to employment.
And Jagmeet, in your response, we're looking for a clarification or distinction.
Sure. Yes. So I appreciate that, and I think that's why you've done so much work on this file, and you have a lifetime of experience on it. What I've been proposing is a plan, a Canadians with Disabilities Guarantee, to ensure that those Canadians that are living with disabilities are lifted out of poverty. The plan would affect thousands, hundreds and thousands of Canadians with disabilities. And this plan is something I'm proposing as a way to lift out people who are already in poverty. And I want to understand if you have a concrete plan to help those folks.
Absolutely. So it starts with employment. It starts with the Canadians with Disabilities Act, so that we have the same accessibility in Canada that exists in other provinces, in other countries, including in the United States. And it means ensuring that we are lifting all people with disabilities across the country out of poverty. That can be by using disability supports and disability supplements, and it's also by using the working income tax credit. So by doing that, by putting together that framework, we can lift all people with disabilities out of poverty.
Thank you, and we're going to hear again from you, Peter Julian. It's your turn for a question.
Thank you very much, and I'm going to go to Charlie and follow up on the question around post-secondary education, because I listened to the interview, very good interview. When you said that there is a question or a difference between pragmatic policies and policies that I presume are less pragmatic, you did point out specifically the issue of tuition. 18 industrialized countries have free tuition. Why do you feel it's not pragmatic?
Well, Peter, you've told us that we will get free tuition, but you've not told us the cost. When I said there's pragmatic and aspirational, I don't know, my colleagues seem to think that aspirational means negative. It doesn't. Aspirational is something I work towards. But if I'm going to be aspirational, I want to not give false hopes. So give me the numbers, Peter. Once we have the numbers, then we can talk about it. Like I said, the issue of tuition is crushing. I don't know how much more violently I can agree with you on this. But the ability to deliver this, if you're just going to
And the figures are already rolled out by the CFS, less than $10 billion if we have the federal government actually put aside things that they already pay for. For example, the federal government has post-secondary education tuition credits that go above all to wealthy families. That's $2.5 billion a year that we spend on that. So when we talk about putting those resources in, we're talking about $10 billion. Is that something that would then have you say, this is pragmatic, I support it?
Well, this is great. This is the first time, Peter, you've given me a number. So you move slightly off from the aspiration to the more pragmatic, and that's what the question about these debates are. We agree on the crushing level of student debt. But you know, aspirational, it was Justin Trudeau who was aspirational in the last election and promised Canadians the moon and had no plan to deliver. So I learned from that. If I'm going to make a promise, we're going to have it costed out. So now you've given me a number. We will look at this. I think we will continue in other debates, and it's going to be a good, healthy discussion.
Thank you. Thanks, candidates. So here's another question for all candidates, and you'll each have 1 minute to respond. The question is, after many years with strong NDP MPs elected in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland and Labrador, a Liberal sweep in 2015 left the party with no seats east of Quebec. What is your plan to win back seats in Atlantic Canada? Jagmeet Singh, we'll begin with you.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, we need to acknowledge that we have won here before and we can win again. We have deep roots here. As you can see, we have a packed room of New Democrats. And might I also mention many young New Democrats, which shows the vibrancy of our party here. So we have a lot to be hopeful for. I mean, we were dealt a crushing blow, though, and so we need to acknowledge that. So some of the things that I believe in. I'm a growth candidate. I believe in growing the party, and I will do that by signing up new members across this country. We also need to fundraise. To win an election, you need to be well-funded, and so I will work hard and diligently on making sure we're well-funded. But we also need to have a vision that provides people with a sense of what a new democratic government would look like. And that's why we've been releasing policy plans like the Better Work Agenda, talking about how we can ensure better work in this country with minimum wage standards, with labor standards, with banning of unpaid internships, and also a support system like the income security, the income guarantee that I talked about.
Thank you. We'll move now to Nikki Ashton, please.
Well, I can say that definitely as a member of the federal caucus for almost 10 years, I and I know many of us missed greatly the work of so many incredible MPs from Newfoundland, from Nova Scotia, who fought for their constituencies and who fought for people across the Atlantic. We need them back. We need to elect new Democrats in this part of the country. And the way we're going to do it is by putting forward a principled, bold vision that reflects the issues, the challenges that people here in the Atlantic face, challenges like good inequality, challenges like the need for good jobs, challenges like climate change. We also need to organize, and I just came from Nova Scotia where we saw a great win from Gary Brill and the Nova Scotia NDP team, and I want to give them a shout out. There's incredible energy there. There's incredible energy here and in New Brunswick, and I know in PEI, we need to work with activists, with social movements, with labor to rebuild here in the Atlantic, and ultimately in 2019 to elect NDP MPs that will fight for you.
Thank you. We'll move now to Guy Caron.
Thank you. One key to this will actually to have a better integration of what we do at the federal level with provincial parties. We don't speak to each other. We do when we come here. Acknowledge presence of Earl McCurdy here and Jerry Rogers as well. And when we have a chance to see each other, we do it. But we don't do it in a systematic fashion. Before, like in the last century, basically under Ed Broadbent and after, we actually used to meet in multilateral meetings where we could actually discuss as a new democratic family, those issues in a room. We were meeting frequently to actually find out what we have in common and how we can actually work together. So that will be key here in Atlantic Canada, as it will be for the rest of the country. Another element is that Trudeau will actually have a record this time to defend. When he's openly musing, or his government is openly musing things like maybe Atlantic Canada will not have its reserved seat anymore at the Supreme Court, those are things that will come back to haunt them in the next election.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from Charlie Angus.
Well, when you hear the deafening silence of the Atlantic caucus of the Liberal Party, who have not spoken up on any of the issues, you know the work that needs to be done. When before we had Yvonne Gaudin and Jack Harris and Megan Leslie and Robert Chisholm, Peter Stauffer, we can look at what the Liberals are doing, and they're doing nothing for the region. So that's number one. We're going to have a record to go up against. Number two, we got to rebuild a grassroots network. It's become so centralized. I mean, when was the last time anybody from the party wrote to you and asked you what you thought or what your priorities were, as opposed to saying, hey, we're checking our records and you owe us money? That is so disrespectful. So we have to rebuild that grassroots relationship. And number three, and I learned this from Jack, and Jack talked me into running, not Jack Harris, he could have talked me into running too, but Jack Layton. You got a leader on the ground, and I'll be here because I've been here, and I'll continue that.
Thank you. Now we're going to move to Peter Julian, please.
I've been an Atlantic Canadian organizer for the NDP. And I've been on the ground, and both before and after the big first Orange Wave in 1997 was active. And the solutions are solutions that require a lot of hard work, but we can do that. We can do this. And we start with trusting the membership. Stop with just sending the fundraising emails and start with actually getting that wisdom and the strength that is in our membership right across Atlantic Canada. It then continues with broadening our base and going out and seeking those thousands of new leaders that we need from social movements, the labor movement, and the environmental movement. And young Canadians are active in the environmental movement. And it's using the new technologies. 25 years ago, I worked for an obscure man who was running for Congress in the US. He became well known about 25 years later. His name is Bernie Sanders. Bernie was always bold, but he always used new technologies. We've got to do the same.
Thank you. We'll now have one last question, and for the purposes of our live broadcast, each candidate will get 45 seconds to respond. The question is, if you did not become a politician, what job would you have liked to have done and why? We're going to begin with Peter Julian.
Okay. Well, the three jobs that I've loved the best, aside from being a parliamentarian and an NDP activist, was first off working in a brewery, where we got the sample at the end of the day. I always took the bus home. Mountain Hills, it was great, great beer. Secondly, working as a teacher in Quebec. When I spent the decade there, I paid for my studies by working as a teacher, and I loved that work. And then before I was elected as a parliamentarian, I worked with deaf and hard of hearing adults and children in British Columbia. And that is a passion of mine. Most of the people sleeping outside tonight in this rich country are people with disabilities, mental or physical. We need to change that. So if I'm no longer a parliamentarian, I'll go back to one of those three jobs. My passion is people with disabilities.
Thank you. Guy Caron.
I've always been interested in public policy since I was in the student movement, CFS. That pushed me into economics. I worked in communications as well for the Council of Canadian Civil Society, and then for the Communications, Energy and Paper Workers in Canada, now part of Unifor. So anything that's related to public policy is something that drives me, something that fascinates me. As an economist, yes, but I can do it in other ways as well. Both my parents are teachers. It's something that is very passionate vocation in the family. My brother is a teacher as well. So if I hadn't been an economist, if I could not be an economist outside of being a parliamentarian, I would likely be in teaching.
Thank you, Nikki Ashton.
Well, I'd love to do the work I got to do before I got elected, which was teaching. I was an instructor at the University College of the North, where I'm from in northern Manitoba, and I got to work as well with First Nations in our region as part of the teaching work I was doing, as well as research. And it's it's not lost on me that many New Democrats come from an educational background, a teaching background, because I think that's where you see a connection between with community. That's where you also see a belief in that there's hope to build a better future. For me, this is a critical field and certainly connects in politics in many different ways.
Thank you. Charlie Angus.
Well, I still remember the feeling I had at 18 getting in an Econoline van with 6 punk rockers and heading out to see the world. And that was the greatest adventure I ever thought I'd be on. And I love the music. I love performing. I love seeing people. And I've transferred that to politics, and it's been the greatest honor of my life to do public service, because it's not about me. It's about serving people and making it better. So, hey, if I get rejected, you'll see me probably busking down on George Street. I'm not a bad busker. I've done it. I can be loud. You might be surprised that I can be loud, but I can be really loud when I need to be. So that's where I'll go back.
Thank you. Jagmeet Singh.
Thank you. My favorite job was a job my parents hoped that it would discourage me from, or encourage me to go to school. I worked in the cornfields in Windsor, and Windsor is known for lots of cornfields. We walked 300 acres a day, and my parents were like, okay, this is going to teach him that he's got to get an education. I came back saying, this is the greatest job ever. I get to be outdoors all day. I get to be under the sun, and so it kind of backfired a bit, but that was my most fun job. I was a lawyer before I got into politics, and the work as a trial lawyer representing folks that were less fortunate, that had issues of access to justice, was very rewarding, and it's something that allowed me to do things that I believed in a lot. I was a human rights activist for a while, and I didn't really get paid for doing that. So if I talked about my most shallow and just selfish job, is I love martial arts, and I competed amateur at quite a high level. I'd love to do that again.
Thank you. Now we're going to have 90-second closing statements from each of the candidates. We'll begin with you, Guy Howell.
Mes amis, my friends, leadership is about unity of purpose. It's about bringing together every part of our movement to achieve a common goal. We're all part of the same new democratic family, and leadership means finding common ground to advance a progressive agenda. It means recognizing that BC NDP's concerns about energy and the environment are legitimate. It also means recognizing the monumental work that's been accomplished by Rachel and Natalie in fighting climate change and diversifying Alberta's economy. Leadership means recognizing that these two governments have far more in common than which divide them. It means uniting Quebec progressives and with like-minded folks, like here in St. John's, like in Newfoundland and Labrador, and across the country, something I've done my entire life. It means reconciling the concerns of rural Canadians, even as our cities continue to grow and prosper. And I grew up in a rural riding and spent most of my adult life in urban settings. It may be tricky to find that common ground, but that's no reason to avoid meeting this challenge. That's what's called leadership. And Jack actually said it best. He said, don't let them tell you it can't be done. Je suis celui qui peut unifier le parti.
I can unify the party. I can beat Justin Trudeau on progressive policies. I can defeat Trudeau and Scheer in 2019, where the debate will be important.
Thank you. Jagmeet Singh.
Thank you so much. Friends, we live in a beautiful country where people truly believe in taking care of one another. Canadians believe we need to create the conditions for everyone to live a truly meaningful life. We want to make sure that everyone can realize their dreams. But the problem is that far too many Canadians are being left behind. People are struggling. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can change that. In fact, as New Democrats, we're the only ones with the courage to do so. We can fight against inequality. Nous pouvons lutter contre les inégalités
We can fight against inequality and unfairness.
We can build a sustainable economy that ensures shared prosperity for all and not limited prosperity for the few. We can make sure that we implement electoral reform that gives people a voice and make sure that the voice is heard. We can tackle climate change and be leaders on a national and an international stage. We can ensure that Indigenous people receive truth and justice and reconciliation. And we can tackle inequality to ensure that people live with respect and dignity. In order to do this, though, we need to bring people together across this country. We need to build and grow our movement. We need to win in 2019, and we need to implement justice for all Canadians. A better Canada is possible, my friends, together with love and courage. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki Ashton.
We are at a critical time in the history of our party and our country. Maintenant, plus qu'à tout autre moment de notre
Now
histoire,
than at
nous devons
any
mettre
other
en
point in our
place
history, we
des
have to
changements
bring in
fondamentaux.
fundamental changes.
Canadians, particularly young Canadians, are tired of the cynicism of the Trudeau Liberals. Ils promettent le vrai changement, mais
They
trahissent les
promise
Canadiens
real
à
change,
tous
but
les
betray
égards, de la
Canadians
réforme
in every
électorale
way,
à
from
l'environnement.
electoral reform to the environment.
Politics based on principle and policies rather than polling and public relations is also good electoral politics. When people, particularly young people, are inspired, when there is hope, they will vote in record numbers. Millennials, who are overwhelmingly progressive, will be the largest voting bloc in 2019. We, as New Democrats, can form government if we are progressive. But we must be clear on where we stand. On climate change, we have to act. Here, it threatens to wipe out fish stocks. It simply isn't good enough to sit on the sidelines. Either we are part of the solution or we're part of the problem. We need a bold vision. C'est pourquoi j'ai adopté une position claire.
That's why I
et
took a
forte sur
clear
les
and strong
Kinder
position
Morgan
on
and Energy
pipelines like Energy
So let's build
East
a
and
movement
Kinder
for
Morgan.
Social, environmental, and economic justice for all of us. Let's make history together.
Thank you, Peter Julian.
I joined this movement at the age of 14 because the NDP is a gutsy and bold movement for social, economic, and environmental justice, and there has never been a greater need for our movement. Our movement is needed to take action for climate justice and to stop Mr. Trudeau's raw bitumen export pipelines. Our movement is needed to promote the 1 million jobs that clean energies policies can produce with the right leadership. Our movement is needed to take action against the obscene inequality that conservative and liberal policies have produced with profoundly unfair tax system. And our movement is needed to bring the right to affordable housing, to free access to college, university, and trade school, to healthcare, to pharmacare, and to dental care to all Canadians.
Our movement is so important to build a strong society, and we need to get our message out right across the country and recruit lots of new social and environmental leaders.
Needed to fight for true, meaningful national reconciliation with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. With all of the challenges that Canadians face, Mr. Trudeau announced this week his big priority, massive increases in military expenditures. I will cancel those massive increases and put those resources to work for Canadians. Canada should always be a voice for peace. A better Canada is possible, a better world is possible. Let's build them together.
Thank you, Charlie Angus.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. You know, when I was thinking of running for leader of the NDP, I got stopped by the senior citizen at the Tim Hortons back home. He's 69 years old, and he tells me he's going back to work underground at the mine on the drills because he and his wife can't live on their pension. And his pension was robbed by corporate raiders. And that's not only legal in Canada, they get corporate bonuses for doing it. And he said to me, I've been promised the moon by politicians, so I'm going to ask you a simple question. If you get in, will you have my back? That's the question here, folks. To take all this great discussion and policy ideas, but to create a platform that restores trust with Canadian people and it gives them hope that they can say no to the dismal spin of political inevitability, that just because the 1% demand more doesn't mean you and your family have to accept less. That on the international stage, Canada doesn't have to give in to the braggadocio of so-called hard power when we should be doing the hard work of peacekeeping and rebuilding. That environmental justice, economic justice, and Indigenous justice are not only attainable in this country, they are inseparable. And I know we can do it because we have such good people in this country. And I've talked to the innovators and the dreamers and the builders, and they're looking for a party in Ottawa and a government that has their back. That's why I'm here, and that's why we're here. I got your back. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That concludes today's debate, the fourth debate of the 2017 NDP leadership race. Audience, now how about a round of applause for our candidates?
Welcome back. You're watching CBC News Network. I'm Natasha Fatah. If you're just joining us, let me fill you in on where we've been for the past 90 minutes. We've been in St. John's, Newfoundland, watching live the fourth leadership debate for the NDP. You've watched 5 candidates discuss a variety of issues. I want to remind you who these candidates are. 4 of them are federal MPs: Quebec MP Guy Caron, Manitoba MP Nikki Ashton, from BC Peter Julian, and from Ontario